go. Right. Okay, so that I think will then comprise the complete review of part 1 and then part 2. So, taking it from the top, relationships. Relationships exist between entities in RDA vocabulary. Entities are information resources themselves. They are the persons or groups who can create or contribute the information that makes up those resources, and they are subjects of information resources, group 1, group 2, and group 3. We talked about in group 1, you have the different levels: work, expression, manifestation, and item. I'll say again that these access points capture relationships at different levels. You can have relationships between a person and a work at the work level, at the expression level, manifestation, or item level. When we create access points or authority records, we are trying to capture these relationships. So author names, added authors, as they're labeled in SAGE, subject headings and series headings are all examples of these. So the next one we have here is a chart to show what some of these different types of relationships could be defined as. On the left, we have group 1 entities, or sorry, we have group 2 entities: persons, families, and corporate bodies. And on the right, we have the different levels of group 1 entities: the work, expression, manifestation, and item. Again, item refers to a specific and unique physical object, generally a uniquely barcoded copy of a resource in a library. Manifestation refers to all such. That is the level at which most MARC records are describing an information resource, is at the level of a manifestation or edition. However, the record also incorporates information that is also descriptive of the expression and of the work. In the center, we have some of the various roles that persons, families, or corporate bodies may take on in creating an information resource. And these roles exist at different levels. Work, the relationship between a person and a work is the relationship of the creator or author. An illustrator, a translator is contributing to an expression of that work that has been created. Then publishers and so forth create the manifestation, the physical copy of that expression, and then finally we get down to the individual item that is on the shelf. So these relationships, as I said, can go every different way between one work and another related work, such as sequels, or such as commentary, reviews, criticism, etc. Between expressions of the same work, the book and the audiobook. Between one manifestation and another, such as reproductions, or between items. And then we have some examples here. Translation is an example of a work-to-expression relationship. An example of a work-to-work relationship is a novel that is rewritten as a stage play. And we have a work-to-expression, expression to manifestation. Okay, so we have, I hope that folks can see my pointer here. So we have in that example, we have the work, which is the author's original text. Then that is an expression of the work. The work as such, it only exists in the author's head, until it is expressed on paper. So this is one expression. Then it has a manifestation of its first edition when it was first published, and then it takes on another manifestation, which is a reprint. So you don't need to get too fussed about keeping all of these relationships straight in your mind. The idea here is that these are all possibilities that exist sort of in potential in the catalog. Other potential relationships that exist are between the subject of one work and the subject of another work. So ideally then these two works will both use the same or similar subject keywords, and we can also relate different subject keywords to each other using, see also or see instead cross-referencing in the authority files. Okay, we mentioned identifiers, and as I said, I believe folks have seen these already in examples of works that are, in MARC records that are imported from OCLC and elsewhere. It is not uncommon to find these. So you'll recall a few slides back, we had the chart with the 3 sets of boxes on it. And these, they're called relationship designators then, are recording the nature of the relationship. So if a person is an author, that is a relationship at the work level, that this person has a relationship to a particular work or works as its creator. The editor then is at the expression level. You may have, for instance, a classic novel that has been edited or has an introduction by different literary professors, depending on whether you get the Oxford University edition, or you get the Cambridge edition, or you get the Yale edition, etc. With a manifestation relationship, you're looking at a person, or more often, I guess, a corporate body that helped produce the physical item. In this case, it's a film. A publisher or distributor of a book would be an example of this relationship between a group and a manifestation in the print world. And then down here we have item. And I wanted to, as I said, explain this a little bit here. And this is being done here in a 100 field. And the reason for that is when you have a thoroughly annotated edition of a work, well, we call it an annotated edition, but per RDA, it is really considered to be a work in its own right. A derivative work, yes, but a work in its own right. So, for instance, you may look at the annotated Alice, which is an edition of Alice in Wonderland that has been, which is, as we all know, by Lewis Carroll, but has been thoroughly annotated with notes by the mathematician Martin Gardner, explaining all of the logic puzzles and other sorts of mathematically related jokes that are in Alice in Wonderland. And in that case, it is considered proper under RDA rules for Martin Gardner's name as the annotator to appear in the 100 field, and for Lewis Carroll to appear then in the 700 field. And the reason for this is that at a certain point, so much new material has been contributed by the annotator that the work is no longer the same as the original one written by Lewis Carroll. Now, this example here that you see is using Ted Hughes, who is a British poet, as an annotator of a work. I don't know which one. It could be something by Sylvia Plath. who knows? So this now catches us up to where we were here when I started the recording. So what are we trying to record in a MARC record? We are trying to record the work manifested, the core element. Okay, Moby Dick by Herman Melville, Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. We're trying to record the expression of that work, perhaps as text, perhaps as a recording, perhaps as a recording of a performance or the recording of a person reading the text. We're also trying to record the particular physical manifestation of the work, the number of pages or the length of the recording, the number of discs containing the recording, etc. These are qualities of the manifestation, but not of the work itself. We may want to record the manifestation of an expression, or the item of, and so on and so forth. And we will be getting into some instances of how this works as we go further along. So, for instance, here's a single work in a single manifestation. The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion, which is a memoir. And we would record this in a MARC record in the following way. Field 100 would be the author's name, and field 245 would be the title of the work. So both of these, both 100 and 245, are considered access points. So in the case of Joan Didion, that's an authorized access point because there's an approved form in which her name should appear. It is considered part of the authority files in the catalog. Now, what then do you do when you have more than one work being defined as an information resource with a title and an author? So you have more than one work in a single physical container. So for instance, an anthology might be an example of this. Or you might also look at a compilation. Strictly means a collection. Well, let's define these words. Compilation could mean more than one author is represented in a single physical item, more than one author and more than one work. A collection generally means multiple works by the same author. So, if more than one work is embodied in the manifestation, only the predominant or first named work is required, wait for it, in field 245. This slide does not say that, unfortunately, but it should. Only the predominant or first named work needs to go in field 245. However, it is necessary to give other access points. It says as our cataloger's judgment. In the Nebraska course, they talked about field 505 for the table of contents being used to record this information, and that field 505 can include subfields to designate separate titles and separate authors for the works contained, subfields T and R in 505. Another way to create what are called analytical or table of contents style access points is using field 740, second indicator 2. So here is an example of one way to do this, and this is actually a way that I did not mention, but I'll talk about it a little bit here. So here we have a compilation of two works, which are, you'll note, by the same author in one physical container. They're in one book. So the author, Philip Lopate, has his name placed in field 100 as an authorized access point, and in fact the primary access point for the record. Now look at what happens here. We have field 245, which contains the cover title of the book, Two Marriages, Novellas by Philip Lopate. This is fine. However, we also have field 240, which appears here, and it contains, as you'll see, novellas, subfield K selections. Why is this? The reason is because Philip Lopate has written more than 2 novellas. Presumably, he's written a large number of novellas. And these novellas have been collected in different books with different titles. So this field 240, which is the uniform or preferred title field, allows patrons to search for not just a particular work with the title, sorry, not just a particular manifestation with the title Two Marriages, but to search for a range of novellas by Philip Lopate. Now, the subfield K and the word selections that follows it here is to indicate that this is not a complete collection. It's some of the novellas that he has written. And the thing to do then to track this RDA relationship is to use this uniform or preferred title in, to use it in all records that represent novellas by Philip Lopate. And this then becomes a title authority in the catalog that will bring back all results, not just the one particular one that we are examining here. So that is a work level relationship, whereas the Two Marriages is really a manifestation level relationship. So we have here 505 containing the titles of the individual novellas. And then we also have down here a additional access point, 700 Lopate Philip. So we have the author access point as it appears in 100, and then we have the title of the work. Now, I am not 100% sure that it is necessary to use both the author name and the title in a situation where the resource, the manifestation, contains only works by a single author. You could, instead of using the two 700 fields, use field 740 and put only the title as it appears, since you already have the access point for the author in field 100, where it is easy to locate via search. Now, this is not wrong. It is just kind of a belt-in suspenders approach. If you were looking at an anthology containing works by more than one author, then yes, it is proper to create a field 700 access point and to have that include the author name and the title of the different works that are collected in the anthology. So hopefully folks are with me so far. I'm going to turn on the mics here for a minute. Are folks following the course of this fairly well, able to hear me and so on?
Like a sentence in English that took 10 words, it took 20 in German, and all the words are really long.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to forge ahead here. So let's see. Okay, the next one we've got here is considered a compilation of expressions. Now, in ordinary terms, we'd call this a bilingual edition, which is to say it contains two expressions of the same work, one in one language and the other in another. In this case, it happens to be English and Italian. So, first of all, you'll notice here field 041, which records this information in abbreviated form. If you want a little more information on how field 041 works, I direct you to the resources from Nebraska training, either the Library of Congress MARC standards webpage at loc.marc.gov or to OCLC's Bibliographic Formats and Standards Manual. I forget the URL for that, but just look for OCLC Bibliographic Formats and Standards Manual in your web browser and you'll find it. So in this case, we have again field 100 with the author's name forming the primary access point for the record. It's traditional in cataloging both in the old AACR2 method and under RDA for the author's name to be primary. That's how the shelves are organized in the fiction section, for instance. That is how the old card catalogs were organized, and so that's something that we're keeping up with. Then in field 245, we have the title as it appears on the title page over here. So subfield C is cut off for reasons of space, but in subfield C it would say edited and with an yada 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 by Virginia Cox, comma, translated by Virginia Cox, dot dot dot. 250, a bilingual edition, appears in the field for edition statement, and then 546, language note, English and Italian. Now, here again, we have an additional access point being created for our author, Maddalena I don't speak Italian, Campiglia, I believe, Maddalena Campiglia, and the title, and then subfield L Italian to indicate here that the work has been translated into Italian. And then we have Flori here in this separate field. There is no subfield L because this is the original language in which the work was expressed. So these are then some of the different roles that you may see in a 700 field. The ones that we saw were relationships between creators and the work they created. However, the 700 field is also used to record contributors to an expression, such as editors, translators. We don't see it here, but it would be proper to create additional 700 fields for translator Virginia Cox and an additional 700 field for Lisa Sampson, who is assistant editor. Other examples might be illustrator of a children's book or performers in a movie. Okay, associated with manifestation. Generally, we don't create a 700 field for people who are associated with this specific manifestation because generally there aren't very many. I'm trying to think of an example of when you would want to record a individual access point, and the best example I can think of would be to record the bookbinder of a handmade book, possibly. Usually when you see a group 2 access point associated with a manifestation, it is a movie studio or a movie distributor or some other person, some other group like that. You may occasionally see I don't know, a state agency or a government agency who has published a certain document and they would be listed as an added author. The group would be considered an added author, but relatively seldom. Associated with item, okay, owners, past or current, custodians, curators, donors. That is an example that you may see in MARC records. However, in SAGE, we would prefer not to list information pertaining to a particular item in the MARC record. So if one library has an autographed copy of a book, don't really want you to put that in the MARC record, and we prefer that you record that somewhere in the item record or the volume record. If you do put it in the MARC record, please indicate which library's copy it is. Don't assume that you're the only library that has an item attached to the record. So let's consider some other ones here. Okay, relationships to persons, families, and corporate bodies. We talked a little bit about this. One of these is that the rule of 3 no longer applies. So only the first listed author or creator is core, meaning required, and would appear in the 100 field. However, it is now correct to list every person who would be found on the title page in field 245, and then to add a 700 field for each person listed as a creator on the title page, other than the first named person. So first named person goes in field 100, the others go in their own 700 fields for a work with more than one creator. Other examples, issuing body. I had mentioned the example of government documents. Here's an example of a marked field that might appear in a information resource issued by a government body. Now, for organizations and groups, we use field 710 rather than field 700. But this is an example of how you would create a field for an organization as creator, or as, in this case, as publisher. Composer, yeah, composer works fine in field 100 if you're creating a record for either sheet music or a musical recording. Obviously, composer wouldn't really apply to other types of works. Contributor relationships. Now, again, we are using the word contributor here to mean that these are not creators of an information resource as such, but that they have assisted in bringing this information resource into the physical world. For instance, by translating it from one language to another, by performing a role, by illustrating a work, editing it, or compiling it. So again, these are all potentially, in the red text, are all terms that you may see appearing in imported MARC records, or even that you can use yourself if you feel it to be necessary. Remember again, all of these, they're called RDA relationship designators, and they are a controlled vocabulary the same way that subject keywords are, or that authors' names have a set of approved forms. So if you do an internet search for RDA relationship designators, you'll find a whole list of all of the different terms that are out there and that could be used. So I'm not going to get too much further into that. You are not required to add these terms to records that lack them. If you see them, though, you should be aware of what they are and what they're for, and know that you can, if necessary, use them. So here's an example of that. And the reason why is because although this information appears in field 245, where we have the information from the title page with the author's name and the translator's name, RDA standards are looking to catalogers to break this information out into separate fields. And there was a pre-existing MARC field 700 for additional authors or contributors, and that's the one that we use. So yeah, relationship designators, the word author and the word translator are added at your own judgment, your own discretion. If they're there in a record you're importing, leave them there. But again, you are not required to go back and add them to records that lack them. Now, something else I want to point out here in this example on this slide is that again we have an instance of a uniform or preferred title. You'll see both phrases used. Uniform title is the older term. Preferred title is the newer one. And the reason this is here is because the librarians and catalogers consider a work to have a preferred title, and that preferred title is the title of the work in its native language. Okay, Pippi Longstocking is the cover title of the book, and it appears in 245 as it should. But Pippi Longstocking is a very popular kids book, and it's been translated into many languages. Its original title is Pippi Langström, and that is, I'm probably going to be wrong, but I think it was originally written in Dutch, or maybe Swedish, I don't remember. But the point is, that is its original title, and it is therefore the preferred title for the work, and appears in field 240, then with a subfield L to show the language that it has been translated into. So this is a field that should be used anytime you have a work that was originally written in a different language than the one in which it is currently held by the library. So for instance, War and Peace, originally written in Russian. I don't recall what the Russian title of it was, but if you look at the record, you'll see it there. Another example might be Les Miserables by Victor Hugo does kind of keep its title, but again, you would want to have Les Miserables and then subfield L English to show that it is not, the original French text, it's the English translation. And especially if in your library you have the same work translated into multiple languages, English and French and German, and then whatever the original, maybe it was Spanish. So this is a way for patrons to, at the title search level, using the title search feature in the catalog, identify the language in which the work is expressed. So we'll be talking about field 240 a little more as we go along. Okay, here are some more examples we mentioned of instances where an organization or group has a relationship to a work or expression. So broadcaster, a TV network or something like that, a museum, different film production firms. So to review it here, representing the relationship between Group 1 entities, persons, families, corporate bodies, and the works that they have helped create. The first listed creator on the title page or other source of information, the DVD cover or the DVD credits even. The first named or first listed creator goes in field 100 as the main access point, and other creators go in 7XX fields, 700 or 710 as appropriate. Again, 700 or 710 is also used for relationships between expressions and contributors. Those contributors, again, can be persons, families, corporate bodies, groups. So, and again, you use 710 for groups and 700 for individuals. For manifestations and items, again, catalogers, judgment in that situation. Here's an example of showing a relationship between a work and another work. Donald McKay wrote a book called Rhett Butler's People, which is a sequel to Gone with the Wind. Here in the 700 field for the record, you can have a subfield I and the information sequel to, and you would then, using subfield A and subfield T, record the author name and title of the work to which this is a sequel. Now, it's being done this way, by the way, because it's not a series as such. You know, you probably can think of several examples of series, whether they're for grown-ups or for kids, and those don't always have the same author throughout the entire series, but they exist in a series relationship at the intent of their creators. Margaret Mitchell was already dead when Donald McKay wrote this sequel. So there's a relationship here which is derivative in that he had the idea to write the sequel based on the prior work, but you can't really consider that to be a series in the ordinary sense. So here's another example of how you could use field 700 to record a relationship between a work and another work, or between a work and a expression. In this case, it's a whole part relationship. So William Shakespeare is the author of many plays, including 4 tragedies. So we have here a collection of his plays, not all of them, but some. And we had the ones that are in there, in fact, are Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, and Macbeth. Now, again, in this example from the ALA, they have used a field 700 with the full author's name, his full access point here, including dates of birth and death as it would appear and does appear in field 100, and then the title. You could, if you chose, create this record using field 740, second indicator 2 instead, and simply list the title. Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth. And again, field 740 you can look up on the MARC standards. The first indicator in field 740 is like the first indicator in 245, it's like the second indicator in 245, and now what it's recording is how many spaces to leave off. If the title begins with the or a or an, you can drop that using the first indicator. Second indicator 2 in field 740 simply means that this title is contained in the table of contents of. And we also see here 505. The reason why we have this information in both places, in both 505 and in 700, is that 505 is easier for the patrons to read when they're using the catalog. It's right there at the top. The 700 fields don't normally appear in a convenient place for patrons, but they form access points for the computer search. When somebody is looking for an author name or a title, then these fields get included. Again, field 240, we had talked about earlier, is missing. By rights, a record like this should have a field 240 in it. And what would this field 240 say, you ask? It would say plays, subfield K, selections. So that, again, if somebody is searching for the plays of Shakespeare, this will appear in a title search as being among their choices. However, it will be identified as being not the complete plays of Shakespeare, but a selection of those plays. Compilation of works, and here we get into an example of how you deal with two different works by two different authors. So in this case, we have probably it's a book for students in high school. It has The Red Pony by John Steinbeck and The Catcher in the Rye. So the cover title, Two Novels About Adolescence, goes in 245 as it normally would. In field 505, you have the title and the author of each work contained. You'll note that this field 505 is actually done incorrectly. It should be 50500 subfield T, The Red Pony, subfield R, John Steinbeck, subfield T, Catcher in the Rye, subfield R, J.D. Salinger. The use of those subfields makes this information more accessible to search. And then in field 700, we have the author's name as it would appear in field 100, plus the title for each of the works contained. Now, the second MARC indicator 2, as it does in field 740, indicates relationship. It indicates that the work listed in, or the resource whose cover title is given in 245, contains the works whose individual titles are listed in subfield T of 700. Now it mentions it says here, use contains work designator. What they're saying is that you could theoretically have it be 700 with a subfield I and the word contains, similar to, there it is, the one we saw here where it says sequel to. So you could replace that with contains in this record here, where you have a compilation of different works. Again, this is probably fancier than you want or need to get, but under RDA, that is a legitimate thing you can do. Okay, so other examples of a relationship designator in a between one work and another work is parody of, for instance. If somebody has a parody of Lord of the Rings, this is how you would record that relationship. Again, the title of the parody would be up in field 245. Okay, 700 Guide to Libretto 4. Libretto, of course, is the lyrics for an opera, and often this is something that is published separately. You have the lyrics to the songs and the you know, kind of like the book of the play. And this one is a little complicated because we have the author's name with date. We have the title, and again, this is the uniform title because it's in German, and then we have language L, English, to indicate that the libretto, this is the lyrics of the English translation of a German opera. It's not the German lyrics of an opera written in German, it's the translation. Anyway, so just to review, these are some of the relationships between one work and another, or between a work and its expressions that you'll find in your average library and in the process of cataloging. Relationships between wholes and parts, for instance, compilations, anthologies, etc. Revisions, editions, as we commonly use the word edition to describe books, translations, different language and abridgments, so on and so forth. So here's an example again of how we might chart a relationship between a work and an expression and kind of put this all together. So again, in field at the very top here, we have 041. We're recording here that this is a work written in Spanish, translated into English. In 245, we have the cover title, 2 Spanish picaresque novels. Picaresque being, what would you call it? Kind of a shaggy dog story. So translated from the Spanish by Michael Alpert. 505, we have the table of contents. We have Lazarillo de Tormes. No author name listed for this one. It's by anonymous. Then we have the second title, The Swindler, and that one does have an author. So this is done a little bit differently. We're using field 730 here instead of 740. And 730 is to indicate that you're not just using the title of one of the works contained in the resource, but the uniform or preferred title in Lazarillo de Tormes English. That is the approved form of the title. And so it takes a field 730. Then we have 700 with the complete author information. Again, we have over here the uniform title and a subfield L to indicate the language into which it's been translated. Why is it 2 different things? And the reason is that the author, when we know the author, is the main access point. So he appears first in the access point for the work, and then we use field 700 to indicate the fact that it is a author name plus title. When we have no author name, we use the title alone, and because it is a uniform title, we use a field to indicate that it is a uniform title. as it says here. Okay. So here's an example of another way to do this. So Gustave Flaubert, an author, a French author. We have field 240, which contains the title of the work as it originally appeared in its native language, with the language that it is now being published in. 245 then contains the title as it appears on the cover page, Three Tales by Gustave Flaubert. And then down here in 700, it adds this translation of, and then repeats the information here. This is, I think, again, not 100% necessary. You have this information in 100 and in 240. It is accessible by the search function in Evergreen. However, if you were looking at an anthology or another instance where you had more than one work contained in the resource, and particularly if you had more than one work by more than one author, it would be good to add this 700 field to the record and break out each of the relationships and each of the entities that are found there. And another, looking at this from the other side here, Dan Brown has been translated into French. And so here we have the cover title in 245, and the cover title is French because that is how it would appear on the item itself. But then the uniform or preferred title is Digital Fortress in English, then with the subfield L we mentioned. And you'll see down here we have field 700 to record the name of the translator, and then an additional one, which again, you may see it, but you're not required to add it in every circumstance. A field to record the relationship between the original work in English and the work in French translation. And again, field 240 already does this to a great extent. But RDA is suggesting that people take kind of this belt-in suspenders approach and put this information in more than one place in the record. And one way to put it in the record is what's called an unstructured description. You can simply include this note here to say that this is a translation of the original. And again, for a work that has a single author, something like this is probably sufficient. A whole separate 700 field with the complete author access point plus the title isn't really necessary unless you're dealing with anthologies and compilations. So related manifestations, and the one that they're really focused on here is reproductions, reprints, and other sort of where the content appears unchanged, even though it's been produced in a new physical form. And here's an example of how this could appear in records that you import. So in the black text here, we have the basic listing for the item. Note field 300. Field 300 here is, field 300 is informing you that the actual item that this record is describing is a microform reel. And this microform is a reproduction of a book in print. So here in field 776, we have the text reproduction of manifestation, and then it has the information, publication information for said book, including what you would find in field 260 or 264, the place, of publication, date of publication, publisher's name, and then we have the physical description of the original. Now down here we have this relationship going the other direction. It's a book that is a reproduction of another book. And this one uses field 775. Now, in RDA terms, the distinction here is that field 776 is used when the carrier or physical form of the reproduction is not the same as the original. For instance, a book that is reproduced on microfilm. So down here we use field 775 because the carrier or physical form remains the same. The old book, published in 1926, is simply reprinted as a new book in 2004. It's still a book. It hasn't changed from being a book on paper to a microform or a computer file or what have you. So that pretty much wraps up the discussion here. And let's see, I am going to try to open up, hold on a second.